Hi, my name is Mackenzie Squires. I will be presenting on the electronic music of Steve Reich. So let's briefly talk about my methodology and my goal in researching this. My goal was to study something percussion related because I am a percussionist. And so I started with that broad topic and then slowly narrowed it down. As you can see, I did percussion groups like So Percussion. So Percussion works with Steve Reich, a percussion composer, and then two major percussion compositions by Steve Reich, clapping music and drumming. And this led me to minimalism and Reich's influence on minimalism, which ultimately led me to his early works, which were electronic compositions, which I am completely unfamiliar with. So it was really cool to dive into something I wasn't familiar with. My thesis, this research will examine the minimalist works of Steve Reich with emphasis on It's Gonna Rain and Come Out through the discovery and explorations of phasing in his early avant-garde electronic compositions through different trains. So I took his first electronic piece, It's Gonna Rain, and then went all the way through to different trains and researched each of them, but emphasized It's Gonna Rain and Come Out because they are his two race pieces and coming off of the Black Lives Matter movement and some comments that Reich made 50 years ago that came to light, I wanted to explore a younger Reich's perspective. So, first, we have to start with what is minimalism? Minimalism is um, defined by Lamont Young as that which is created by a minimum of means, which is really short and sweet, like minimalism. Um, Lamont Young is one of the major four minimalist composers that like started this minimalist movement in music. Philip Glass, Steve Reich, Terry Riley, and Lamont Young are all four. They believe that a composer should reject the musical ideas of the previous music movements and emphasize the simplicity of the melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic content in order to reduce the historical or expressive narrative that they're living through or that the composer believes in. So it's presenting this music without a story behind it. Um, so, who is Steve Reich? He was born in New York and grew up and raised there. He started studying percussion with Roland Koloff, whose nickname was Butch. Koloff was the timpanist for the New York Philharmonic. He eventually got tired of working with Koloff. He went on to college, that kind of thing, and he ended up studying with Milhaud Berio. And those two composers are atonal music composers, which is the music movement before minimalism. But then he started studying with Overton. Overton had one of the biggest impacts on Reich's musical sounds because Overton could look at a piece of music and say, this should be a B flat, not a B natural. He could look at the micro instead of this piece should feel like this, or look at the big picture things. He could look at the detail. And Reich is a very detailed oriented composer. Some of the characteristics from other styles of music and other composers that you can hear in Reich's music: Bach, Schubert, Stravinsky. He was influenced heavily by bebop, jazz, popular music of the day, Baroque, Puritan, and medieval period. Not a lot of composers were influenced by Puritan and the medieval music, so it's really cool to see that influence in him. And influence outside of music was William Carlos Williams, the poet. Williams had this idea that artists should go out into the world and experience it, record or take note of what they find, and then come back and create music, art, poems, whatever, based off of what they've seen. So Reich took this to heart and created his first piece, It's Gonna Rain. He was out one day walking and heard this African American male preacher preaching on the flood and Noah and saying, It's gonna rain. It's gonna rain became the melodic content of the piece and created the piece itself. If we had time, I would love for us to listen to it. But you can look it up and listen to it. It's one of my favorite pieces. You can see the melodic content, It's Gonna Rain. And these are the words for part one and part two. It's a two movement work, um, and it's his first real attempt at creating electronic music. He discovers this idea of phasing because he was using two, shall we say, inexpensive machines that he had found that he recorded the sound on, and he duplicated the sounds, set them to go at the same time, thinking they would play at the same time, but because one was slower than the other, they offset from each other. And so it created this like phasing. It's this idea of offsetting these rhythms. And so phasing became what Reich is known for. And he ended up taking the voices, doubling them and tripling them and quadrupling them and setting them all against each other. And it creates this kind of wash of sound that allows the listener to, any listener, whether you're from the classical music scene or from the popular music scene, to listen to it, which is really interesting. This is one of the pieces that Reich is most proud of because there's this sound that he recorded while Brother Walter, the African American male who was preaching his sermon. A pigeon flapped its wings in the background, and Reich got a recording of that. So in the music, there's this very natural sound of a bird flapping their wings, which is really cool. It makes the piece unique and different from other pieces that he worked on, this extra dimension to it. So then we move on to Come Out, which came out in 1966. So there's Come Out to Show Them is the melodic content of this one. Reich took 5 words, Come Out to Show Them, from Daniel Ham and created a 13-minute tape piece. Ham was recording in an interview with the Harlem Six, which is a group of African Americans who had been accused of murdering a white shop owner in the 60s. They were put on trial, and Ham was beaten along with the other African Americans who were accused of this crime. They were beaten by the police, and in order to be taken to the hospital, Ham said that he had to cut open his arms and the bruises and things on his body and make them bleed. He had to make the blood come out to show them, the officers, that he was actually hurt and needed to go to the hospital and get medical attention. So Reich was provided with over 10 hours of recordings from interviews with the Harlem Six in 1964. He chose Ham's voice and these words because of the melodic content, not necessarily because of the story behind them. But he was commissioned to write this piece because of there was a benefit and a concert to raise money for the community. So it opens up with a minor third, which is really interesting. A thing similar to the pigeon sound is this comma sound from Come Out, and then a sh sound from show. So it creates like a percussion, like kabasa sound, like a sh, which is really cool. And then the comma creates the melody. So you have this melody with percussion underneath, but it's all Ham's words from the interview. And again, he uses this to he phases it and creates this wash of sound to make the listener think about what they're listening to while enjoying the sounds that are created. Keith Potter, the author of 4 Musical Minimalists, states that the statements of repression are enhanced by the grim transmutation of the human outcry against injustice into the relentless machinations of a force beyond human control. In other words, this outcry, Come Out to Show Them, shows the injustice that African Americans such as Ham face and how it can become an important statement for change when they are incorporated into music and allowed to be presented outside of the human control. I think that's a very powerful statement about this piece. So then I went on into a timeline with the rest of the pieces, which I'm not going to go into. But if you're interested in any more of my research, this was a very brief snapshot of the research that I did. I am more than happy to discuss any aspect of this, the race, the music, anything. I just wanted to say thank you for listening.